Hi, Fort Worth moms. I am coming to you live today from the Women's Center. I'm really excited about this. As you know, the last 2 years we have done the Together Project, where we partner with local nonprofits who are working in different sectors of our community. And so this year we have joined up with several organizations that work with women in crisis, specifically dealing with issues of violence against women. And so today we are going to be talking with two of the experts here at the Women's Center, just giving you some really good resources, some insight, and Fort Worth Moms always promises to provide family friendly and family oriented information, but we will be talking about some tough topics today. So I'm going to give you this little forewarning that it might not be suitable for little ears, and so this video will be on our site. And so if you need to step off and come back later and watch it, I really encourage you to come back and do that, because it is going to be great information. But like I said, they are sensitive topics. So if you're hanging out with littles right now, you might come back. So, all right. I am going to be talking with Catherine and Francine, and they will let you know a little bit about them and what they do here. They work in, all areas. They do a little bit of everything. But today we're going to be talking about sexual abuse, that's not the right word, rape crisis, and intervention in that way. And so we will be just talking through these things, giving you some resources, some ideas, some education, and some contacts here at the Women's Center. So I'm going to turn it around and let you talk with them. Okay, hi ladies.
Good morning.
We've got Catherine here on the right and Francine on the left. Why don't you guys tell me a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I am the Assistant Director of Research and Training in the Rape Crisis Victim Services Department here at the Women's Center. Really what that means is I oversee our community education programs that focus on prevention, education for children, pre-K all the way through 12th grade throughout Tarrant County, as well as education and trainings for adults and professionals to try and prevent and raise awareness on interpersonal violence and child abuse issues.
Great.
And I am the Manager of Marketing and Communications here at the Women's Center. And so I'm responsible for all of the communications that go out for the agency and making sure that people are aware of our services and that we are an available resource in the community for them.
Wonderful. Now, I had seen Catherine actually at an event in my school district where she came out to just talk to women and families in our area to give us some education. And so that's one of the services that they provide, is they come into school districts and schools and teach us and our kids just to raise awareness. So that's great. Tell us a little bit more about what you guys offer and kind of the large scope.
Exactly. So a lot of people are unaware that the Women's Center is actually focused on 3 specific program areas. We offer an employment solutions program. That's actually how we were founded. We were founded in the 70s. We're actually celebrating our 40th year this year, so we've been around a long time.
That's great.
But we were founded because we realized that as women were entering the workforce, they might not have had this skills training to be able to enter the workforce. So we were founded with our employment solutions program, and today we still serve women and men in that program. We help people find jobs. We help people with resource connections and to remove the barriers to employment. And then we also help with skills training, so that if you don't maybe have the skills to get into the area that you'd like, we help with that as well. We have a general counseling program that helps with issues from depression, anxiety. That could be marriage counseling, family counseling. We have a very innovative program that we're super proud of. It's about 3 years old now, called Pearls. We work where we are actually going into the home of older adults. You know, a lot of us now, our parents are aging. And so we are going into the home of older adults to help them with depression and isolation issues. And then once we have helped them, then we connect them with each other so that they can continue to fellowship with one another and continue that healing process. So we're extremely proud of that program. And then, as Catherine will talk about a little more, our Rape Crisis and Victim Services, which is probably our most well-known program. There's a misconception that sexual assault does not happen to men. That is not true. So we help women and men and children to overcome the trauma of sexual assault, childhood sexual abuse, and other violent crimes. And we do that in several different ways. We start at the hospital with supporting victims through their forensic rape exam. We help with counseling. We have a lawyer on staff that will help with any legal issues that are associated with that. And then we have group counseling as well. We have a 24-hour hotline that's always available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether you were victimized an hour ago, whether you were victimized 10 years ago, whether you were victimized 60 years ago. That hotline is always available to survivors of sexual assault. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Catherine and let her talk a little bit more about the services that we provide in our Rape Crisis and Victim Services program.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Fran.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so just to tell you a little bit more about the clients we see and how we get clients here. I want to add one thing about our services is I like to always say we are in the business and rape crisis of helping people heal from trauma. And what we know about sexual assault, child abuse, and other forms of violence is that it is traumatic. And that trauma, if people do not receive treatment and intervention right away, that trauma, those effects can last a lifetime. And trauma doesn't just stay with the primary victim, it also spreads. So we can, like Fran said, work with people at any time in their life. We have had people call in who are 70, 80 years old saying, I'm finally ready to deal with what has happened. And we also work with the support system, because that trauma spreads. So we have husbands, wives, partners, parents of children, grandparents, and other caregivers coming in so that they can learn how they can help their loved one work through this trauma, and how they can also practice self-care in case it starts bleeding onto them as well. So I just wanted to expand that with some of our services. But the reason why our services are here is because when we look at sexual abuse and sexual assault, we know that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be a victim of child sexual abuse by the time they're 18. And that can include any kind of child sexual abuse, verbal, forcing a child to maybe watch pornography, visual, so talking to a child inappropriately about sex at an inappropriate age, making inappropriate sexual comments to children, that can be traumatic, but also physical sexual abuse as well. And then we also know that in Texas, 2 in 5 women and 1 in 5 men tell us that they have experienced some form of sexual assault in their lifetime, whether that was sexual abuse as a child or rape as an adult. This is a huge number of people in Texas that this has happened to. And so we want to be there to help, again, heal from trauma, to offer that trauma-informed intervention so that people can move forward with their lives instead of feeling stuck or feeling hopeless. We want to help offer some of that hope. Some of what my team does is trying to work on the prevention side. And what we do is, starting in pre-K, we start talking to kids about these issues. And don't freak out yet. We don't start talking about child abuse with pre-K. The way that we talk to kids is very developmentally and age appropriate. But the reason we believe it's so important is because if kids aren't taught what this is and how to stay safe, then if this happens to them or a friend, we find that there's even more grief and even more feelings of shame that can develop from something happening to them, a friend, or another family member. So some of the things that we teach kids and all the way up through high school is really that there are 3 types of touch. There's safe touch, unsafe touch, and confusing touch. And what safe touch is are things like hugs, kisses, elbow bumps, whatever. I guess a kid the other day was like, fist bumps, and I thought, I didn't even know fist bumps were still a thing, but I guess they are.
They are.
Things that make you feel loved, cared for, and safe. And then unsafe touch is our term for physical abuse. We want kids to know that there's never a reason someone should hit them or kick them in a way that leaves a bruise or a mark, sometimes even a broken bone or bleeding. And then confusing touch is our term for sexual abuse. And I always encourage parents to use that term. We use it very strategically. Confusing touch is whenever anyone tries to look at, take a picture of, or touch your private parts, which are just parts of your body covered by a bathing suit. And it's when they try and touch that private part for no good reason. Okay, because we know that sometimes moms and dads have to touch children's private parts. And you're putting on medicine, helping babies change diapers, sometimes helping with showers and baths. Those are times when that's okay. But if it's not a time that's appropriate, then kids can learn that they can say no, they can get away when they can, and they can tell a trusted adult. And I like to go over all of that whenever we talk to parents, because I think people get really nervous and scared that if you talk about abuse or rape, that then it will happen. But what we know is if you talk about it, then actually it will give people language to know what it is, and it can help people feel empowered and to be able to stand up for themselves and for others. And if it does happen, they're more likely to start seeking services right away or tell someone about what has happened, which means that trauma can start getting worked on faster. And so somebody might be able to go, maybe they wait a year to tell someone, but that's 1 year, that's not 70 years down the road.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to help. And I think too, what we hear a lot with parents is, well, how do I even start this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Because
And
it's scary.
It is really
and it's
scary.
awkward,
It
and
is
you're worried you're going
really
to say the
awkward.
wrong thing.
Yes.
So how can you encourage us and help us
Yeah.
in that direction?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I always like to say we teach kids about rules from the time they are babies, before they even know how to speak. We're saying things like, ouch, that's hot, don't touch that. Don't run into the street. It's really funny when we talk to pre-K and kindergarten kids, because we ask them, tell us some of your safety rules that you follow. And it depends on where in Tarrant County kids live, because we'll hear things like, don't go into the fields without boots on because you'll get chiggers. Or we'll hear from kids in Fort Worth, don't run across the street, or don't go to this area because you'll get run over by a car. It's really funny, the different things, but we teach our kids these safety rules already. And so we can just add in this as a safety rule, like teaching kids that their private parts are parts of their body, covered with a bathing suit, they're special, and no one has a right to look at, take a picture, or touch them without a good reason. And then that's it. Just being able to leave it at that, and being able to be open about if this happens to you, you can say no. And practicing with your kids, saying, we want to respect adults, but if it ever has to do with confusing and unsafe touch, you can say no and practice with them. We love practicing with, especially with the little bitties, because as adults, we always tell kids, don't say no to me.
Right.
So whenever we ask kids at first, practice the first part of the safety rule, say no, we always hear kids say, no, like really quietly. But then towards the end of the program, they're so excited. This is like the one time they're allowed to say no. And then you even have like little kids standing up saying no and being able to be assertive.
Yeah.
And then we always want kids to identify trusted adults in their life. So if this happens to you or a friend, who is someone that you can tell? And having that conversation with your kids really opens up a lot of trust and helps them know they can come to you. Helping identify who some trusted adults are, which we say it's always someone 18 and older and someone they see on a regular basis. So yes, kids can trust Santa Claus, but Santa Claus only comes one time a year. So who are some people they see on a regular basis, so that they can identify even if something like bullying were to happen to them, they can go forward and talk about it to someone. And then we always tell parents, make sure to always in the conversation to let kids know, if this does ever happen to someone most kids this won't happen to, but if it does happen to someone that it is never a child's fault that this happened to them. Never. And it's never too late to tell. So maybe you don't tell right away, but it's never too late to tell. There's always going to be someone there who will help you. So if the first person doesn't help you, keep telling until you get the help that you deserve.
That's great.
Yeah. And again, we make it sound
Right, exactly.
But it can be as simple as just starting that basic conversation. I was meeting with a mom a few times, and I love what she does with her kids. Her kids started seeing our Play It Safe program in elementary school, so they were used to the language of safe, unsafe, confusing touch. And once they started hitting that fifth, sixth grade age, when they no longer wanted to talk as much,
Yes.
she made it so that every time they got in the car, she was like, "That is my time that I have." They're forced; they can't get out of the car.
That's right.
Right? So she would just do. I thought it was genius. She would just ask them randomly, like, "Did you get any safe touches today?" And then some days she would ask, "Did you see anyone get an unsafe touch? Did you get an unsafe touch?" And then did you get a confusing touch? So it's just part of the daily ritual of getting in the car, and it just kind of let her kids know that they could talk about it.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
really like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Where it becomes kind of a natural rhythm, and it's not something so shocking or, difficult. It's just part of your day-to-day. I like that. That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to moms or teachers or somebody who's working with children who might be approached by a child and told this information? What do they do with that?
Yes. So first of all, what I would say is believe that child. Believe children. Children don't make this up. What we know is that less than 2% of children are making up a story about it. And if you can approach that child with belief and say, "I am so sorry that happened, but I believe you, thank you for telling me," then what we know is the brain will stay in more of a survival mode, or will get out of just a survival mode, being trauma. My words just got. It will stay out.
It happens.
It will get out of that survival trauma brain and start being more logical and feeling empowered. And so kids are more likely to move forward with telling more people, practice being a part of the investigative process, and move towards healing just by believing. So that is the most important thing. And then you have to report. So in Texas, if someone suspects abuse of a child, it could be neglect, it could be physical abuse or sexual abuse. If someone suspects abuse of someone under 18, as well as people who are older or disabled, it is a requirement to report. Everybody in Texas is a mandated reporter, everybody 18 and older. And what that means is you report to an investigative agency such as CPS or the local law enforcement jurisdiction. And that can be really scary for people. We all have this idea that CPS and law enforcement just come in and take the kid away. That's really not what happens. It takes a whole lot to actually remove a child from a situation. A lot of times they will do the investigation, and if they find that the child is in a safe place, they're really just there to offer resources. And if you don't report, then what's happening is sometimes that kid is losing out on resources. And that family as well, because maybe it, like I said earlier, trauma spreads. So maybe it's that mom or that dad who maybe was triggered because of something that happened to them in the past, and so they weren't aware, or they didn't want to even pay attention that babysitter was doing this, or grandparent or somebody was doing this. So they could also benefit from resources. So I would say believe and then report, and then do something to take care of yourself. It can be really hard if you suspect something and you report it, because we hold on to these kids and we hold on to these disclosures. But it's so important to practice some of that self-care and be able to say, I've done what I can to help this child. Now let's move forward to help other kids.
That's really good. What about if you're an adult? If there's an adult watching this who has recently or even very far in the past gone through sexual abuse, what can he or she do?
Sure. Yeah, so first off, that you don't have to tell anyone, you don't have to make a report. If something happened to you 20 years ago, you don't have to report that. You have that option. if that perpetrator is still maybe around offenders, it would be a good idea to report, and we might have to report that. But you yourself have that option to be able to report or not, work with an investigative agency or not. Really, the more important focus should be knowing that you have a right to get help when you're ready. And people really can heal from this at any time. The effects that trauma has on our brains sometimes can be staggering to learn about. You know, it changes our neural pathways. It changes the way that our neurons fire and send messages to each other. It changes the chemicals that are released in our brain, you know, adds extra adrenaline and cortisol to our bodies. And those can have long-lasting medical effects, because your body's not supposed to have adrenaline at a high rate all the time. Your heart's not supposed to be racing in survival mode all the time. However, if you get help, even if it's 20, 30 years down the line, all of those effects can be stopped and you can start to heal. And when I mean healing, you know, yes, of course, emotionally, but also your brain can start to get rewired back to the original healthy place before the abuse happened. Those hormones can be lessened, and some of those medical effects can even be stopped.
You know, Catherine, it's so interesting you say that. So we had a client that I had the privilege of speaking with who was in her 60s, probably late 60s, and had been abused when she was very young by a family member, and talked about growing up with such anxiety and such depression in a physical, very physical sense. And she said the older she got, the worse the anxiety got. And she said when she started treatment here, she felt her anxiety lessen and lessen with every session. And she said, you know, when I started, I would go on road trips and I would be deathly afraid to go over bridges. I just couldn't even handle driving over bridges. That's something most of us take for granted every single day. She said by the time she finished her treatment, that she could drive over a bridge and actually look over. She said, I didn't realize flowers grew under bridges until I finished treatment. So sometimes we take the physical part of trauma so for granted, but treatment 50 years later and she's a new person. She's a different person. So it really is never too late.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. And part of the treatment, I think it's scary for people to take that first step. You know, you're having to share. I believe that sexual assault and abuse are one of the worst things that someone can do to another person. Because it's like this hidden pain, this hidden trauma, and it takes so much courage for anyone to come forward and say, this happened to me, this is my story, can you help me? You know, I've had all this trust that was broken in the past, my boundaries are all over the place. How do you start building that? But I will tell you, part of our trauma therapy here is really focused and very specific for working with trauma. And working with these issues. All of our therapists are trained specifically to work with these issues and to empathize and believe and affirm clients as they come in. We also encourage people to come to what we call Intro to Trauma. It's a 4-week open group session that is just educational. So it's not a group therapy session, and sometimes that helps to lessen the anxiety that people feel about walking into treatment. It's about what is trauma, how does trauma affect our brain and body, how does trauma spread to our support system, and how do we start practicing some of that self-care. So people can always come to that and start being able to just get an understanding. Because like Fran said, there's a lot of times people don't connect that this happened and this is why I'm acting this way or I feel this way. So that Intro to Trauma can really help with that, as well as counseling.
That's fantastic. Now, for these services, is there a cost? Do you take insurance? How does somebody go about
in rape
receiving
crisis
these?
and victim services, we are grant and privately funded. All of our services are free and confidential. The other wonderful thing about our services is there's no time limit. So it's not that you come in and only get 4 sessions. You come in until you feel like you are done and ready to go.
That's great. That's wonderful.
And then as far as how, I think you want to answer that, how you kind of go through the intake process.
Yeah, what to expect if they come
So
to get help.
What would happen if you call in for services? Now sometimes we do have a wait list because there's so many people in Tarrant County who need these services. So Sometimes we have a wait list, and that's with 9 full-time therapists on staff.
Which is the benefit of the intro to trauma
Which
class,
is
is
benefit.
because you can always go to
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
And start there.
But we also have a crisis team that can help provide resources right away if there's about a month wait list for therapy or even a 2-week wait list. But basically, people just call in and request treatment, request that they want counseling. And we do ask, what kind of counseling, are you, was it a child sexual abuse, was it sexual assault, or was it some other form of violence? And that's more for our grant purposes. So if people were to call in and it feels, sometimes I think it could feel invasive, but we're really calling because one, we need to be able to provide this information to keep showing this is such a need, and also so that we can look at which therapists would be the best, because some therapists work best with crisis situations, some work best with trauma from 20 years ago. We call it delayed trauma. Some work best more with children, so we just have to know a little bit more to triage where you would fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just coming in for counseling. The first counseling session is usually just an intake session, completing paperwork, and that usually takes about 45 minutes to an hour. And then after that, you and the therapist can set up weekly sessions or bi-weekly, whatever would work best for you.
That's great. That's wonderful. All right. Is there anything that you all just would like to say to the women of Tarrant County that might be watching? Something encouraging, or if they've been through this, some hope for them or for their children or their family members? What's something you would say?
I think that there is hope. I think that's the most important thing. There's hope, and not just hope, but transformation. What has happened to you. I just talked to this lady that said, I can't control what's already happened, but I can use what's happened to make others' lives better and to maybe impact somebody else. And I think that's what I would probably leave, is that, we are sometimes put on this earth to impact others. And so it's not the end of the story, that there is hope after, and that there can be transformation after.
That's great.
And what I would say along with that is that yes, trauma happens, and people are victimized in our society. However, we have so much resilience as humans. It wasn't just one trauma that happened to you as you grew up or in college or whenever that assault happened or domestic violence happened, whatever it was. You're also learning resilience techniques throughout your lifetime. And people are so amazing. Sometimes I look at our victims who become survivors, and it's like, how you have gone through all of this and you're still living, you're still working, you're still raising kids, you are surviving, you're getting through this because of that resiliency. And that resiliency is also what helps you to grow in that hope through counseling. And it really starts to kind of balance out and even overtake the effects of that trauma.
Agreed. Totally agree.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, like the lady you were talking about, you'll be able to look and see that there are flowers growing under the bridge.
That's right. That's right.
I love that. There's something poetic about that.
I think that one of my favorite quotes, I love the movie Move On. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a quote in there that says, the flower that blooms in adversity is the most beautiful flower of all. And I think that's what we do. Yeah.
Right?
I think that we are the flowers that bloom in adversity.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We will, I'm going to turn this around. You might see my tears in my eyes here. That was good. I will be adding some information for you so that if you would like to contact the Women's Center for any of these services, or just get more information for you, a family member, or friend, that you can do that. You can find that information on the post for this video. And if you have questions, feel free to post them here. And I'm sure these ladies would be happy to answer them, or we can get you in contact with people you need. Thank you again, ladies, and we will talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.